Hey everybody, welcome back to Brent's Backyard Redneckery. So in a previous video, I made some blackberry wine. It's still in the process of sitting and aging and all that good fun stuff, but I still had some blackberries left over. So I decided to make a blackberry mead. Now, last year I made dandelion mead, which turned out pretty good. A little bit floral, a little bit honey. This time I'm going to use the rest of these blackberries, about 5 pounds, and we're going to make us a gallon of blackberry mead. So get ready. I'll tell you what you need to do. Let's get into it. All right, so here's everything we're going to be using for our mead. We've got 5 pounds of blackberries, our raw honey, some potassium sorbate, a little bit of orange juice, yeast nutrient, a few different things here, pectin enzyme, wine tannin, some clarifier, and some Camden tablets. So let's go ahead and see what our first step's going to be. So first thing we're going to do here with our 2-gallon bucket, we're going to pour in about 3 cups of hot water. Next thing we're going to do is take about 5 Camden tablets. We're going to crush these up into powder. Once we've got those crushed into powder, we're going to put those in our water and swirl it around. So we'll toss that in there, and then we'll give it a nice stir with this stuff so it's all nice and combined. And then what we'll do is put the lid on and shake it up, and then dump it out. God, that stinks. We'll dump it out and let it drip dry. Since this honey is raw and it doesn't pour, we'll take our big pot and we're going to get some hot tap water. We're not going to boil this, we're just going to fill it up and let that sit until it turns into liquid. And so with our blackberries, what we're going to do with these, after your bucket is dried out, we're going to plop these down inside there. We're going to take our fruit masher and mash these up. Once we've got them mashed, we'll go ahead and move on to our next step. Now, these have been frozen for quite some time. I had to thaw them out over the course of a couple weeks, but they're already kind of mushy, so I don't think we're going to have much of a problem. But I'm going to go ahead and crush these up as much as I can. Usually I would use a wine bag if I'm making wine, but this mead that I'm looking at making doesn't call for a wine bag. So we're going to see how this turns out with all the must just floating around in there. Well, as you can tell there, we've got a little bit more liquid going on in this, just from it sitting here in the hot water. So we'll give it just a little bit longer, and then we'll weigh out our honey. All right, so that was in there for about 30 minutes. We're pretty much fully well liquefied now. So we're going to weigh out what we need, and I'm going to need about 4 pounds of honey out of this 5-pound jug. Okay, so I have my scale zeroed out. I'm just going to pour this in here. You can see it's still a little bit clumpy. That's okay because we're going to mix it with our water and melt it down the way it needs to be. Completely and fully liquefied, and we'll be good to go. Alright, so what we're going to do here first, we're going to put a gallon of spring water down in here. So when you get that water boiling, then we're going to pour our honey in. Okay, so we got this dissolved in here now. We got to get this up to a boil and let it go for 20 minutes. Then we got to pour it into our primary fermenter here. All right, so that's finished now. We'll just pour it off in here. We'll top it off with the other half a gallon and let it cool down to room temperature. Okay, so I had to let this sit overnight to get to room temperature. But the next thing we're going to do is take 1 Camden tablet. I'm going to crush it up. We'll sprinkle it in there. We're going to put in 1 teaspoon of pectin enzyme. Sprinkle that in there. We're just going to stir this all in here. Get it all down in there nice and mixed up. And this is going to sit for 24 hours. And then we shall see what happens next. Before going on any further, I'm going to check our specific gravity, see what we're sitting at. I want to make sure. So let's find out. Our starting specific gravity should be somewhere around 1.080. So I'm going to call that good, and we'll move on to the next step. So the last steps we have here before we cover this up and put on the airlock, we've got to take 4 ounces of room temperature orange juice. I'm going to put in a teaspoon of yeast nutrient, And we're going to put in our yeast. I'm using 71B Lalvin. We're just going to mix up that yeast nutrient and the yeast. A couple seconds there. I'll pitch it in. We've got to put in 1/8 of a teaspoon of wine tannin, then mix this up. Just got to get this all mixed in there. Our yeast nutrient and our wine tannin in there. We'll pop our lid on. Slip in our airlock. We're going to put some water in this baby. That thing's going to float. There we go. Got a good little bob there. So whenever the yeast starts taking effect, the bubbles will come out and the trapped gases will release through there. And that's it for now. So what I'll do now is let this rest, and we'll watch it over the next few days until all of the air bubbles are out of that airlock, and then we'll be ready to rack it into our secondary fermenter. All right, that wraps up another episode of Brent's Backyard Redneckery. So at this point, we have our mead. It's finished. We've got it racked into our secondary fermenter. We're going to let it sit there, and it's got to age for a certain amount of time. I think it's around 3 to 6 months, and then we have to do it again, and then again. And this stuff has to age for a year overall before you can even bottle it. So it's going to be a long, drawn-out process, but in the meantime, we've got the basic parts taken care of. So in the meantime, we've got the basics taken care of. So if you guys like this video, you learned something, give me a thumbs up. Share it with all your friends. Come back next time. I'll tell you what you need to do. Y'all have a good one.